Fragrance fam, my name is Izzy with the AFI Media and Product Development team. I am here today to make a bunch of candles, 25 of them to be exact. If you are ready to start scaling your candle business up or just want to take your hobby to the next level, not only am I going to show you exactly how to make candles using all these materials here to make the process a little more streamlined, I'm also going to break down some candle math for you guys. That way you know exactly how much wax you're going to need, how much fragrance you're going to need before you get into making all your candles, so you don't end up with too much wax, too much fragrance, not enough wax, not enough fragrance. So without further ado, I am going to grab my apple cinnamon fragrance here and we can get started. Believe it or not, making the candles themselves is actually the easy and the fun part. It's doing all the math beforehand that can be really nerve-wracking. I know a lot of these equations might seem like a little strange, but once you know them, you can apply them to just about any batch size, any wax type, any fragrance, any container size. For starters, I have my wax here. This is the AFI Premium 4600 soy container wax. If you like soy waxes, this is a winner. It's comparable to GW464, which many of you have probably worked with. I am going to go ahead and add it into my Presto pot here. A Presto pot is a great investment to make if you're making candles on a large scale. You can only fit so much in a pouring pitcher, so when you're moving up to multi-pound batch sizes, it has temperature control, which will make all this easier. I know a lot of beginner candle makers, me included, take the capacity of your jar. If you were to buy an 8-ounce mason jar, then figure out what, let's say 92 and 8% of that is. So, 92% will be your wax and then 8% of that will be your fragrance. But there is a couple problems with that. For starters, capacities of vessels are usually listed based on their water capacity. If you buy an 8-ounce mason jar, that means it can hold 8 ounces of water. And wax has a different density than water. Wax is about 86% as dense as water. So if you're measuring out the amount of wax equal to the amount of water that can fit into a jar, it's not going to be compatible. When you have your jar, you're going to fill it up with water. Measure it out on a lab or kitchen scale. You're going to want to do this all in ounces by weight or grams. Grams can be more precise, but ounces are fine, especially if you're working in a larger quantity like this. Find out exactly how much water fits in here up to the line where you want your wax to be. Then you're going to take that number, for example, these guys can hold 3 ounces of water, and multiply it by 0.86. 0.86 is a decimal version of the percentage 86, which, like I said, wax is 86% as dense as water. You get that number, and I'll pull up my notes right here for you guys so you can know exactly what I'm talking about. 3 ounces of water in each. If I multiply that by 0.86, that's gonna get me a total weight of 2.58 ounces, since we're doing in ounces, in these jars. That 2.58 basically represents the entire weight of everything that's going to be in the jar, because remember, it's not just wax, it's also going to be fragrance, which presents another issue that a lot of candle makers have when determining their wax weight and fragrance weight. Remember, when we are calculating fragrance load, we're calculating it as a percent of the wax itself. If a wax can only hold up to a 10% fragrance load, and if you're using that 10% figure and calculating it based on the total capacity of everything in your jar, you're going to get more fragrance than you actually need, and that can be held inside the wax, and then you'll have issue with the fragrance itself leaching out and all that. We are going to have 6% as our example in this equation. Here's where we're going to put the equation up on screen, and I am going to go through and explain it for you guys. We've determined our total weight. That's going to be 2.58 ounces for each of these jars. Included is wax and fragrance oil. Now remember, your fragrance oil is going to equal your wax times the fragrance load. In our example today with apple cinnamon, that's going to be 0.06 or 6%. If we take our equation for fragrance oil, which is your wax weight times your fragrance load, in our example that is 0.06, and plug that into our total weight equation, we will get a total weight equals the weight of our wax plus the weight of our wax times 0.06, which represents the fragrance weight. Doing a little algebra here and moving some things around, we can convert this equation to read as your total weight equaling your wax weight multiplied by 1 plus your fragrance load, aka 0.06 in our equation. So basically that 1 is representing 100% of the wax. In order to find out our total weight from here, all we have to do is a little more algebra and divide 1 plus 0.06, aka 1.06, from both sides of the equation. Remember, everything you do to one side of the equation, you have to do to the other to keep it even. Going to our example with our jars here today, we have our total weight of 2.5 equals our wax weight, which is unknown, times 1.06. Now, since we want to find our wax weight, it's the one unknown thing in the equation, we're going to divide both sides by 1.06. If we divide 2.58 by 1.06. That's gonna mean our wax weight equals 2.43 ounces. That's exactly how much wax we're gonna need in each of our containers. Hopefully all those graphics helped you out a little bit. If you want to double check your work when you go back, and you figure out, all right, so each of my candles is going to have 2.43 ounces of wax times 0.06. That is going to give us our fragrance load for each individual candle. So that's 0.15 ounces of fragrance in each candle. Add those numbers up again. So in my case, I would add my wax weight, 2.43, to my fragrance weight, 0.15. You should get that original number that you came up with when you determined the capacity of each of your jars. I'm doing 25 of these in total. Multiply my figures by 25. That is going to get me 60.75 ounces of wax in total, accounting for all that fragrance that's going to be in them as well, which is 0.15 times 25 is 3.75 ounces of fragrance. But we'll go ahead and check our temperature here. So we are sitting at about 175 degrees right now. I'm going to want it a little bit warmer before we go ahead and move on to the next steps. Melting it to 185 degrees gets all those wax molecules nice and open for fragrance. In the meantime, we can prep all of our jars. Having a tool, a wick centering tool like this, is going to make it easy for you to just smack each of your wicks down in there. Another thing that's going to make it a lot easier for you is wick sticker tabs. We use these whether we're making 1 candle or 80 candles, and these stick really well to glass containers. So once you tab your wick, you want to go ahead and thread it in to your wick centering tool, and it's magnetic, so the metal wick tab will adhere to it and not fall off. Apply some pressure, line it up, and this is going to keep that wick centered, so all you have to do is press down and you get it centered. We also have our wick holders here. These are simple, they get the job done. I've got this at about 190 degrees right now. I'm going to bring this down to 175 degrees to add our fragrance in. Typically, you might want to have an extra pouring pitcher on hand, but in my case, I have got this handy dandy pancake batter pourer. So basically you fill it up with your wax, open it up, and the wax is going to pour out of your little wax pourer here, so you can quickly and easily fill up each of your jars without having to worry about spilling or the surface tension of the wax getting wax all over your table, and you can be a lot more precise with it. If you are going to be measuring fragrance directly into your Presto pot, you're going to want to make sure that you thoroughly clean everything inside between different candle batches. You're going to need some isopropyl alcohol for that and some paper towels. Just make sure all the wax is melted out, and it can also help to clean out the spout. Let's say if you make one batch of apple cinnamon candles and then you make another batch of bubblegum candles, you don't really want those fragrances mixing. This is a 1 ounce sample of our apple cinnamon fragrance oil. But when pouring candles in a batch size this big, we are going to need a little bit more. I've got a big bottle of apple cinnamon today. I picked apple cinnamon because it is a crowd pleaser, a quintessential fall fragrance. If you like literally anything about fall, this will definitely speak to you. What we're gonna do is measure it out based on those equations that we did earlier in the video. You can pour your fragrance straight from the bottle into your pouring pitcher if that's where you have all of your wax and it's sitting on a scale. I like to measure it out separately. This will just make sure you don't accidentally pour a little bit too much, because once you pour a little bit too much fragrance into your wax, you cannot take it back. I'm going to need 3.75 ounces of fragrance oil. And another thing I find very helpful is having a pipette or a popsicle stick or something you can hold on to pour the fragrance down on. In doing that, we'll just make sure the fragrance doesn't have any surface tension against the side of the bottle and drip all over the table. One last wax temperature check. Let's get these candles poured. I'm keeping this at 175 instead of letting this cool anymore, because as soon as I pour it out of my Presto pot into my batter pour, the temperature is immediately going to drop. If you've worked with wax before, you know that as soon as wax hits a surface that's far cooler than it immediately solidifies and hardens against the surface, and that is producing waste in the candle making process, which when you have a business, that is money. Here we go. Going to hit this with our heat gun for a moment here. And this is just going to ensure that we don't lose a bunch of wax to the side of our batter pourer here and risk losing it and not being able to fill our candles. Keep an eye on the temperature. I'm pouring our AFI Premium 4600 wax at 140 degrees today. For the first jar, I'm going to use my scale just to get a visual at exactly where that wax is going to be when I fill it up to the capacity that I calculated at the start of the video. You can do that for every jar, or in my case, since these are just little tiny candles that I'm going to be giving around the office, I am going to do it by visual. All right, I've got 2.58 ounces. And we're just gonna go ahead and fill the rest of our jars. And this is where conducting burn tests and knowing what wax and what containers you like to use beforehand is really helpful. That way you don't end up making tons of candles and doing all this math and all this effort just to find out that you're not a huge fan of the burn pool or you don't get a very great grow. It's no big deal if you have a little bit of wax left over when making candles on a smaller scale for yourself or friends or family. But as you scale up, just imagine if that little bit of wax you had left over for making one candle was multiplied by 10, 20, 25, even hundreds of candles. That's a lot of money lost. But now we have used up all of our wax. Make sure that your jars are evenly spaced nicely from each other. That is going to make sure the wax cools with a nice even surface. Needless to say, the entire room smells like apple cinnamon now. It is delicious and makes me very excited for the fall season. I'm going to check back in with you guys tomorrow and give you just a final review of everything that we did in today's video. See you then. Okay, so it's the next day, and when I came into the AFI project lab this morning, everything smelled like apple cinnamon. It smells really delicious in here. As you can see, all my candles are cooled. So the final step from here would be to take off all my bow tie holders, trim the wicks to 1/4 of an inch, and then finish packaging them up. If you're making on candles at this scale with your wax, your fragrance, your containers and wicks and everything, you've already conducted burn tests. At this point, I am gonna go ahead and take all these bow tie holders off, but I think everything from here on out is pretty straightforward and y'all have got the rest. Let me know if the little candle math I gave y'all at the beginning of this video was helpful to you. I really hope that you can use it in all of your future projects, whether it's on a small scale or a large scale. And if you haven't already, give our apple cinnamon fragrance a try this fall. It is really good. I'm gonna get one last sniff before we close out. Oh, I love it. Okay. Thank you guys so much for watching, Fragrance Fam. I will catch you guys in one of our future videos. Bye.